Hi everyone, this is David Collins from Arbor Guitars. In our final video in this series, we're going to start looking at running separate volumes for two different pickups, as is typical in a Les Paul, a traditional Gibson style wiring. Traditionally, they are wired to be dual master volume control, so that when you're in the middle position, roll back either control all the way to 0 and you will kill the signal overall. Another possibility is to wire them as independent, so that you can roll back one pickup entirely without affecting the output of the other. However, it does come with some consequences in the way it interacts, changes the taper and the tone of the pickup as you use them in application. For this, rather than using the sweep generator, we have set up the exciter coils to run a 220 Hertz signal through one pickup and a 330 Hertz through the other. So you can see the two different peaks here on the spectrum analysis. And what we're going to do is show you with a standard dual master volume control. Just the bridge pickup is wiring through this box, running through this box. The neck pickup is running through the controls in the guitar, joining up after the box, and we're going to leave these controls untouched. We're just going to work on the bridge pickup here. As you roll down a master volume, we're running audio taper, no treble bleed, modern wiring. As you roll down an audio volume, you really cut a good deal of that pickup signal in the first third of the turn. And then through this center plateau, you find very little change really until you get down to the bottom third, right around 2 or 3, and you start to cut the overall signal. The signal really starts to drop out when you get down to the very bottom. When we use a linear pot for the volume in this position, we get a much more extended range of adjustment of balance when we're in the middle position. One of the reasons you so often find the two pickup, two volume models such as the Gibsons with linear potentiometers, because it allows much more flexibility in that middle position as opposed to audio, where it really drops out quite immediately at the very top. A little bit more sensitivity to fine-tuning adjustment there. Now let's look at what happens when we go to independent volumes. Say you want to roll one pickup out completely without affecting the other, without having to use the switch. So we're going to switch up to independent, and now we can roll out the bridge pickup until it is entirely gone. There's still all of these overtones and noise here you see obviously, but the 330 Hertz signal is all the way gone now, without affecting the overall volume. However, this doesn't come free of consequences. Let's take a minute and rearrange our setup and look at what happens when that independent wiring is used in a single pickup position. So once we take this independent wiring scheme and switch it back to a single pickup position, it affects the way the volume control works in a pretty dramatic way. And the reason for this is, as we turn the volume down, we are increasing the load on the coil. By the time you get down to halfway, rather than the coil seeing a combined 250K load from the tone and the volume pot combined, it's seeing down below, a 100 or even a 50K load, which drastically cuts the high end in a way that can't really be recovered. Here is master versus independent wiring. Master control, one pickup used alone as we roll back. We've already seen this, the response stays fairly consistent. Let's switch to the independent wiring now. And as you can see, we start to roll back and immediately we start to lose a drastic amount of high end. Compare that to master versus independent. It changes the taper notably. It doesn't roll off the low end and mid-range nearly as quickly, but it rolls off the high end rather immediately. And the thing is, because that loss of highs originates in loading of the coils, there really isn't any way we can recover it as well with either 50s wiring or treble bleed circuits. Treble bleed circuit might bring it back up a little bit, but compared to master wiring, you can see the bass relative to the treble is a notable difference. with any variety of treble bleed circuit we choose. Again, same with the coil versus output loading. We roll our independent wiring back, we switch to output loading, and although it changes the taper a little bit, it really doesn't notably change the frequency response, and we can't recover any of that high end. So let's go ahead and plug in and see how it sounds. Okay, now we are only running the bridge pickup alone through the control box, and the neck pickup is wired to traditional controls mounted in the guitar. We're not going to touch these for now. They're two 500K. They're matched to what we're going to use in the box here, two 500K. But we're going to look at independent versus master wiring. We're all familiar with master wiring, which is how pretty much all Gibsons come stock today. That means in the middle position, you are going to be able to turn down the overall volume with either one of the controls. Same applies for the tone. It affects the overall tone. And as you can see, with an audio taper pot, there's the middle position with the audio taper on 5 versus the neck isolated on its own. Easily 80–90% of the bridge signal out of there in terms of what comes through proportionally in the amp. So you have a great deal of flexibility there. With a linear taper in the middle position and a master volume, you can get even more range of adjustment there. Is really spread out from, say, 10 to 4 or so, 10 to 3 maybe, rather than on the audio taper pot around 10 to 7, where the pickup you're turning down is pretty much out of the signal. And then both of them at a fairly similar level at the bottom start to kill the signal overall. So go with the independent volume. The ability to turn it all the way down on the bridge pickup without affecting the neck, or vice versa. And as you can see, most of that change occurs between about 10 and 8. By the time we're down to 7, not a whole lot of range there. If we switch to linear, it becomes a little bit more flexible. But still not a huge difference in the bottom half. The biggest problem most have with independent wiring is that when you start to roll down a single pickup, when you move out of that middle position, the volume control acts completely different than a master volume does. Here is a master volume without any 50s wiring, output loading, or treble bleed circuits. Fairly quick roll off that we use to clean up from overdrive with an audio pot. Switch to independent wiring. You notice it becomes much more muddy. It doesn't roll off quite as fast. Independent, master. The bass doesn't roll off as fast, but the treble really rolls off instantly. Now the problem is, because of the way this circuit works, as we turn it down, we are actually putting a very heavy load on the coil itself. We are lowering the resistance of the potentiometer as the coil sees it. And once you lose the trebles at the source, in that way, they can't really be recovered as well with tricks like the treble bleed or coil loading of the tone control. Treble bleed brings a little bit back with the independent volume, but compare it to a master, you can see that the independent ends up much bassier. Let's move it into overdrive and use a standard master volume. our tone, switch that to an independent, you can see you've lost a lot of the high end permanently, even if we engage a treble bleed circuit. You've lost high end relative to what you would have with the master volume, and without really gaining that much more versatility in the middle position. So as you can see, although the independent wiring does offer a little bit more flexibility for fine-tuning in the middle position, it comes at what most players would consider a pretty drastic cost when using either pickup individually. In addition to that, dual master wiring really offers all the sensitivity of balance most would ever find useful, given how quickly it can roll off one pickup in the overall mix in the first half to 2/3 of the turn before it starts to affect overall volume. For this reason, independent wirings are not often used in guitars with just 2 volume controls, but generally accompanied by a third master volume that can be used for an overall volume control, while the other 2 are just used for balance in the middle position. Also, because the independent wiring is grounding out the coil instead of grounding out the amp, when we turn it all the way down, we really have a significantly larger noise floor because we are essentially leaving the cable close to unplugged, leaving it with only the resistance of the volume pot connecting it. So it comes with multiple costs that most people don't find useful. However, some do, and if so, it's just good to be aware of what other aspects of the controls will be affected. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you found some things in these videos useful, or at least a bit more clarifying than they were confusing. I know there are a lot of variables to juggle around simultaneously with all of these different components and wiring schemes, but if you go through and break them down point by point and look at each factor individually, hopefully this should streamline your process of figuring out what works best for you. If you'd like to follow us here on YouTube, we're going to be coming out with all sorts of other videos as time allows. A lot of other things we want to talk about and discuss and demonstrate. You can also find us on Facebook at Ann Arbor Guitars or online at AnnArborGuitars.com. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.